Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here for an interview with Lewis Shaw from Braincrack Games. How you doing, Lewis?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's so fun to have you on, and we're going to talk about the topic of why you should not start a board game company
Yes.
because they're terrible.
Yep, you'll lose everything. I've lost everything. This is my Dickens style tragedy and my moral fable of why you just shouldn't get involved. Stay clear.
All right, so obviously we're kidding. That was clickbait, but we are going to talk about the kind of risk reward assessment when starting a board game company. So that if you were interested in that, you can get involved as safely as possible with advice from a pro.
Yeah, pro. I've been doing it. I don't know if it still counts as professional or amateur, but I have been doing it. Yeah, about 5 years now.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so how did you get started? What made you think I'm going to have a board game company, and how did you start?
I made the classic mistake of playing modern board games and then thinking, yeah, I could do this, and then designing a board game of my own. The first one was awful, so I skipped that one, and then made a card game called Downsize, which we tested over sort of like a couple months period, sort of pretty casually, and then put it on Kickstarter. It was one of those ones where I'd been reading all of the Jamie Segmeyer blogs and trying to do as much research and kind of freaking out and pulling my hair out, being like, this needs to be like perfect one shot. And then like my partner Emily got really just a bit tired of listening to it, I think. And one evening I was sat there on my laptop and they were just like, just put it up. So I did. And then it went really well and we got Project We Love and we got like £30,000 or something. And oops, got a board game company without really doing a huge amount of the groundwork or marketing or anything. And then kind of snowballed since then.
So for your first game project, you basically did everything yourself. All the graphic design, sourcing materials, finding a factory. Like, how do you even start knowing how to do that?
A lot of Googling, a lot of reading blogs, and getting sucked into the very useful kind of Facebook predominantly community of people who are all having the same idea and wanting to share it and kind of share the pain and the joy and help each other out. And that's something that is still useful. It's still a part of like my process for a lot of things is just asking people when I don't know how to do something. But yeah, it's still a monumental task of like, especially when it happens like that, right? And then it's not like something I plan to do, and realizing on the fly, like, oh, now I need to become a logistics expert, and now I need to, you know, deal with like language licensing and stuff that I never dreamed I would actually be doing. Yeah. Daily challenge.
So what are some other games that have come from Braincrack? And also, how did your process for publishing games evolve since that first one? When did you start realizing that you needed to kind of share the load a little bit, maybe bring in an expert?
So the first two games we released, Downsize and Mind Out, were designed by me. And the second campaign, Mind Out, first time we launched it did not go so well. We managed to relaunch it and successfully release the game. But that was the kind of, it was one title that like wasn't necessarily something people wanted as much. It happens. And it was that kind of point I realized like, this is a process I'm really enjoying and putting things out into the world and making stuff. But there are lots of people who want to design and release their own games without necessarily taking all of the risk, and are looking for people to help kind of bring their dreams to life. And so that's when we kind of started taking pitches, and very perhaps overconfidently kind of wandered up to like pitch meetings and stuff, being like, yes, we're a publisher, we're a games publisher, we're a company that you need to like bow to and respect and like show us your games, which all felt a bit ridiculous, but like there we were, we did it, and people started pitching games, and everyone since has been designed by another designer, and that's a process that's like that I've really enjoyed and has evolved itself over time, like how we approach things. And the team has gone from just me doing everything poorly to I think I worked out the other day, it's like 10 to 20 people doing each thing that they are passionate, good at, adding their little bit of magic to the mix.
Awesome. So do you still consider yourself a game designer, or do you really prefer the sort of logistical publishing end of things?
I like to make games. That's the thing that, like, with the fullness of time, the goal is that I can get people who are good at / passionate about doing the actual, like, the things I don't want to do, but still doing them, like still doing a lot of them on the daily. I still design games from scratch, although I've not published one for a while now. And I have a hand in designing and developing elements of every game that we've brought out since. I think the last game I didn't really touch, like, rules wise, was Reducer. That was just like components changes and stuff. But every other design I've kind of been in the development cycle for, and that's been something that's an art in itself, I think, and it's something that's really rewarding, not having to do that initial slog of, like, creating a concept that works, being able to just, like, dive in afterwards and be like, change everything, which of course people hate, but that's half the fun.
Oh, that's awesome. So you sound like you really enjoy this work. So what made you want to talk about why not to do it?
um I think it's the case of a little bit of, like, from our own experience in the last couple of years, like how hard things have been. So, like, there's been, well, and the whole time we've been running it, we've been facing, like, kind of challenges that we weren't prepared for, and we didn't quite realize at the time how much of a kind of impact on our, like mental health and finances and stuff that it had, until we, catching up with, like, friends a year later and be like, oh, what did you do over the last year? And theirs included a lot less of, like, moping and crying and and they were going out and doing things. I was like, oh, okay. So, like, first year, when we were printing downsize, the Brexit vote happened and all of the currencies went a bit crazy. And then obviously, since we've had, like, COVID and everything, 2 years ago, our son was born 3 months prematurely. So that was like, it was, like, right in the middle of, like, Venice, like our biggest project yet, and then we had to just turn around to backers and be like, everything needs to kind of stop now. um, and then at the same time, I've been processing, like a ADHD diagnosis. I had, like, about 2 years ago as well, and trying to improve that element of my life, because it's something that's always, it's had a profound impact on the business in good ways and in bad ways. Yeah, and it's that mixed with also, like, concern for the amount of people who see the opportunities in the board game industry and want to meet that. I feel like it's something that people naturally gravitate towards, is like, I'm going to start a company and start making things myself and take all of the responsibility. And as exciting as that is, it's something that has a poorly advertised cost, I think, both, like, financially and like lifestyle. And it's something that it's not that I don't want people to do it, but I want them to make it an informed decision, and really, like, know what it is they want to get involved in and what they want to do, and I suppose, like, help people find the best way to get involved and more in their hobby. And yeah.
So what are some of the hidden costs that took you by surprise as you got into the process of publishing games?
So the big obvious one at the moment, being the one that's affected most the people over the last year, is, like, freight and logistics. The knowing not just, like, the regulation and the tax laws in, like, your own country, but also in every country that you're then, like, selling to and shipping to. It's then also, like, the time investment of these things that you don't necessarily always realize up front, like, this is going to be something that I have to deal with. And they are things that can also be very, like, unforgiving if you don't know about them ahead of time. You know, like say your factory like sends out your games and everything's done, and you're like, yeah, it's on its way, and then it arrives in like a port, and you have like, you know, letters in other languages maybe, or like, you know, things that you don't necessarily understand, and you're being charged daily for storage until you solve a problem, and it's just like it can escalate quickly, right? And that's when things go well. That's when things, when you have a project that funds and you have games that sell and people want. Before that, there's this whole lead up, especially now with like having to stand out in the crowd, and like it's not a hugely like competitive industry, but what people don't necessarily realize you're competing for is people's attention. And that can have a big cost if you want to like advertise, or if you want to do like grassroots. That's its own like cost of time and effort, and that's something that, I mean, just recently, right? Like in November, we launched our last project, Last Resort, and we spent in the region of like a couple thousand in like promotion, and then it just didn't fund. Like we canceled it, but we got a couple of days in and we just looked at the kind of projections, and we were like, this isn't going to happen, and we had to pull it back. And it was a big like shock to the system, right? Because it was something where we had like I think 5 or 6 projects before that had funded. We'd gotten into this real rhythm. We'd raised about like $500,000 in funding, and we were just like, yeah, okay, we're not like shooting for the moon exactly, but you know, we can do this. So it was like a real like moment of like, oh gosh, yeah, okay, this has put like, you know, all of a sudden like more risk than we realized, just because things hadn't continued as planned.
So actually, there's several questions I want to pull from this, but let's go back a bit. So how do you handle all the language barriers at different ports with factories that are probably not in the UK? How does all that work? I've always wondered this. How do you make it work? Do you hire a company? Do you find just a liaison?
It's a lot of trial and error. It's also a case of immense privilege of speaking English as a first language. That is the international, like, you know, language of business. It's something that like most Chinese factories will have, you know, people trained in speaking English at various levels, better than my Chinese at any rate. And then also just like finding people who are not just speak the language, but have a good sense of what it's like to collaborate remotely and do that effectively. And I've like worked with people who are, you know, very, very good at it. And especially like young people sort of growing up now who have like grown up with smartphones, and they know that like that's a tool they can use to just like show you something remotely, rather than having to, you know, express ship something across the world, like be able to send you videos. And then all the way down to, you know, sometimes you are emailing someone and relying on them for huge amounts of you know, money or support, and it's just AWOL. It's like, I hope this person's okay. It's a frustrating situation to be in, but that's the way of it, really. It's yeah.
Ew, that's interesting. It sounds time consuming. How many hours a week do you say that you have to put in to make a company float?
It's, as with all of the like issues I'm kind of wanting to discuss, it's a matter of expectation, right? Like there are a lot of people who will start up a sole trader, or, you know, sole proprietorship, and they want to do like a small amount of games, and, you know, something that's like easy and homemade, and they have a really good like well-defined scope for their project, and naturally won't run into a lot of these problems because they're, you know, creating it at home, or they're keeping their like goals really modest and their rewards really achievable. It's really when you or rather when I set this expectation of myself of being this like competitive international publisher, that all of these problems arise. And it's a ladder, right, of like finding new problems and then complicated solutions that are new goals, and it's building a company, right? So it is a case of, I know people who do this in the evenings after work, and they make a modest income from it, and they are sensible with their ambitions. And I envy those people crazy, you know, a lot, because I'm not that person. I was working full time most of the past 5 years, having to find jobs where I could balance Braincrack and staying employed. But yeah, like that's the thing. It can be a full-time job. It can be a couple hours a week. At the moment, I mean, over the last couple of weeks, over the last couple of months, because we have a 2-year-old now, and he is crazy and at home and does not like me using my laptop and not paying attention to him. It's been like not a huge amount of hours going in, and I've been relying on our team a lot. But then, like, I think the plan is for this year to be mostly doing like 3 days a week. You know, that's what we can afford to keep him in nursery for, and getting whatever else I can do done in the evenings. You know, it's a case of time's a resource, and trying to align that with expectations of myself and of the business is an ongoing struggle.
And so if you're relying on the work from contractors, how do you even hire someone? And also, when you are dealing with the strain of your business, I'm assuming that profits that you make go to them first and then to you. How does that work?
So there are a lot of different ways of doing it. There's like, I know a lot of companies that like lean really heavily on volunteers and have like a really passionate community behind them. I know people who have like full-time, you know, in the office with them teams. And whereas what we do is we tend to find people who have either had experience of setting up their own things in the past, or they have like, you know, sole proprietorships and they're kind of self-led, so that they are kind of responsible for the amount of work that they're taking on and not relying on us for an income. We tend to be really like explicit with people when they, you know, join the team and say like, this is what you can expect from us. You know, don't bet everything on this. And that's I think the best way to like start those relationships honestly. It's been something we've done entirely remotely from like day one. We're not interested in, you know, who's up the road. We are always looking for like people who match our ethos, who have experience and are self-driven and talented, even if, you know, wherever they are in the world. Like our art director is in Australia, so like a lot of mornings I'm speaking to him like first thing so that he can, you know what he's doing the next day before, you know, he goes to bed. And yeah, like like I said, there's lots of approaches to doing that, but we've tried to find something that works well for us and works well, and most importantly, for the people who want to join us and want to give their time.
Nice. And so, all right, so you recently had a Kickstarter that didn't go the way you wanted it to go. The game actually looked really fun, so we can talk about that in a moment. But, you know, I guess I've always wondered this because I always see it from the consumer end, or maybe I did a preview, right? So for me, you know, my involvement with Kickstarters is very much about what am I going to get from this? So I'm pretty sure that what am I going to get from this is a question on both ends, but I don't know how publishers ask and answer it, if that makes sense. How do you gauge how much you need from a Kickstarter? And also, you know, I know that if the first couple of days of a Kickstarter are a little sluggish, that's not a great sign for the campaign. How do you decide when to pull the plug? And how do you change things when you regroup? Because I know a lot of Kickstarters fail and then do fine the second time around.
Yeah, I think like, so again, it's all a matter of like ambition and expectation. And it's something that if we had launched this game, you know, 3 or 4 years ago when we were just starting out, we wouldn't have had some of the problems because we didn't set that expectation of ourselves of still succeeding. So like, to give some context, our last 3 successful campaigns took I think they all did like just above like $100,000. So we could comfortably expect, or thought we could comfortably expect the next one to do maybe half that, you know, worst case scenario. But that was optimistic. But like I say, like this was a case of us wanting to print a certain number to achieve a certain cost. Well, I may as well say it. We wanted to print 5,000 or more because that brought down the cost of the plastics that were in the game a lot more. Meant we could achieve a more like tantalizing price, both for backers and then as like a target like retail goal. And we were what we've been doing with each of our games now is like having a plan for language licensing from the incept. So when we start a Kickstarter, whether we're offering languages on that Kickstarter or we have people lined up to take the license when it goes to print, that kind of boosts the numbers and it boosts the costs.
Yeah.
But those costs are really to just get a retail launch. Like, these aren't money grabbing campaigns in any sense of the word. Like, if we hit our goal, that's like, if we hit our goal and then a bit, then we've covered our costs. You know, if we just hit our goal, we'll be able to deliver it. If we scrimp, there's not a huge like buffer of, I need my paycheck out of this as well. It's it is a speculative thing, and that's why we can. That's why we think it's the responsible thing to do when we get a couple of days in and things are slow, and we think that, you know, with the financial and the mental effort of running a whole campaign and keeping up all those like communications and managing that community really quite intensely for like a month, if we think, oh, that's going to result in us just funding, maybe covering our costs, then we think, okay, we need to change something. And it was a horrible decision to make, like, especially with like, you know, that whole build of like excitement and putting like all of the work in beforehand, just to get, you know, 2 days in and think, oh, okay, need back to the drawing board. Let's do all of that build up again. But then, like, I think the reason they do tend to do well the second time round is like it gives you a really strong idea of what that expectation is, and being able to say, like, if we're going to go back, we can change our numbers to kind of meet that goal. You know, you use what is there, because there are people who are really passionate about Last Resort, and people who, you know, whether they did beforehand or after the campaign cancelled, like sat and played it with us, and they were like, oh, this is really good, this definitely deserves to come back, and they're excited for it. So it was a case of like capitalizing on that in a sense, and being like, okay, and knowing that, okay, we've got something here, we just need to manage our expectations of it and put it back into the world, but a bit more carefully this time.
So what kinds of things can you tinker with in a campaign to make it go better the second time? Is it all in advertising and word of mouth? Are you changing like what you're going to charge per unit? You know, I mean, stretch goals aren't a thing if it's sluggish, so probably not that. What goes into making the changes, and what changes have you found get the best results?
It all depends. I mean, it's how close you get the first time, right? Like, if it's if you are, you know, 90% on the last day of your campaign the first time around, like I say, sometimes it's really worth going the full length of the campaign the first time and to like build up that audience. And then if you can end your first campaign on like, you know, 95% funded, you don't have to change as much when you come back the second time. In our case, we were way off. So it was a case of really revisiting everything about the campaign and talking to the people who backed it, the people who have backed our previous campaigns but didn't return, and really asking them, like, be honest, you know, this is your one thing I love saying to backers is like, this is your opportunity to make your impact. This is where your footprint will go. So, you know, step on it. And say, like, what drew you to this? What didn't draw you to it? What seemed off about it, so that initial pitch can be refined more. Because I mean, like, you know, anyone watching can go and look at the Last Resort Kickstarter page for the first campaign. It was, I thought, you know, really professional and came across well, but it's if that is what it was aiming for, if it missed the mark, it's, you know, it all goes to waste. And then that we've revisited the price point as well, and changed some of the things that are in the box so that it is easier to manufacture at a lower quantity and more affordable for the people who want it, and the people who are on the fence and thinking, you know, I'm not sure about this, I don't want to necessarily risk, you know, like £30, but I can go for 20 or whatever it is.
Gotcha. And so, since I'm on the media end of things, I'm just curious about this because I'm curious about it. I don't really do a lot of Kickstarter previews, and I never charge for them, but I always wonder, how do you decide how to spend your ad budget? where are the best places to drop some cash to get the word out about your game? And do you do static ads? Do you have video makers that you go to again and again? Where are you getting the most results?
This is one thing I'm really bad at. This is the one thing I do, like, pay someone else for advice on, just because, like, especially because the whether it's like social ads or people watching various YouTube channels, it changes so much over time. Anything that I did say now, if I could actually bring anything to mind, which annoyingly I can't, would be useless in a month's time, right? Because an audience may have dropped off, or Facebook may have changed something about the algorithm that rewards one type of ad and gets rid of another. And that's one element where, even if it's, whether it's paying like a marketing consultant or an agency to get some help, even a small amount of help, like an hour's conversation to know what the kind of lay of the land is, can be a huge help. Or just like reading blogs, like the Hootsuite do a really good regular blog on what's working and what's not working, and that's based off of work that they're doing as well. Like spilling the tea on why are our Facebook ads suddenly doing nothing. So that's really that my advice there is listen to someone who's not me, because I'm very people led when I have been doing it myself, and it is a case of, if I can send the copy to someone and they can say something nice, if not nice, then informative about the game that's useful for backers, then there have been a couple of people who I just will send a copy to regardless, because it's trying to not just figure out what's going to get us like traffic and people looking at the page, but also what the people who are already looking at the page want to see and want to know about the game and want to hear it from someone who's not us. Because like Kickstarter itself has a huge amount of inbuilt traffic, and making the most of people who are there and making a decision is really I think the best way of spending it, but results may vary.
That sounds like results may vary is basically I think the summation of this whole conversation so far.
Yeah.
So what would be, for somebody who wants to start publishing games, or maybe they have designed a game they want to publish themselves, what are your best starter tips for people to get into this based on your experiences?
If you haven't already, play it with people who don't care about your feelings, is a harsh way to put it, but people who have nothing invested in it, and who will not hesitate to be like, oh, this is Dune Imperium, or telling you whatever other game it is that they've played recently, because that is a huge amount of like knowledge and wealth, and it's information about how, whether you're publishing it or someone else is publishing it for you, what people will think when they look at it. Like all of our playtest forums ask people, we've got a bunch of questions we ask before the test has even begun. We're just like, look at it on the table. What do you think this is going to be? Who do you think it's for? Because that really shapes not just what people want to buy and want to play, but what they think their friends will play. There's a huge amount of like perception goes into that. So yeah, play it with other people, get honest opinions from people, and share it as much as possible. Like I think like there's a lot of I encounter a lot of people who have kind of kept things very close to their chest, or maybe not realize that there are places where they can share pictures of their design. And equally, there, I've encountered a couple of people who've like just posted something in a group or on Reddit and gotten this like amazing response, and overnight they're just like, oh my god, how do I help this? And suddenly they like want a publisher to help them or point them in the right direction, because there's just something about it that has attracted people, from like a really like top level viewpoint, and that's something that's like incredibly invaluable, just from a publisher perspective. If it sounds really stupid, right, and superficial, but if you can come to me and say like, not only have I designed this game and I think it's good and then my friends it's good, but I posted a synopsis about it on Facebook and it got 100 likes in a public group, that's something to show that, oh, there is actual interest in this, and that's not just a business thing either. You know, does this match what people's idea of fun is? Because those games don't always necessarily make the most like money, but they can really like help grow an audience and give something credentials if people don't if people want to like something from the outset. That's like a really valuable asset that I think I'm trying to pay more attention to.
Interesting. What about on the sort of business logistics end of things?
So I mean, if people are wanting to self-publish, what they need to look at is really what their options are just for starting a business in their areas, and it will the liabilities and responsibilities will vary wildly within each like country. In the UK, the big thing is like whether you are a sole trader or whether you are a limited company. I think it's similar in most countries, and it's a case of what are you taking on as a liability? If something goes wrong with your project and you are in debt, does that affect you personally, or does it affect the company as an entity?
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's huge that everyone needs to understand. That's like that's the losing the house over my card game kind of angle. And I've said that a couple of times. I need to iterate that. That hasn't actually happened to me. I feel like I use that as an example too often. And then it's also like kind of the liabilities and the responsibilities. So then like starting a company is more safe from a personal perspective, but then there is a lot more admin involved. We very meekly thought like, oh, we can file a company tax return. That's easy enough. And then we tried doing it and we're like, all of a sudden needed to hire an accountant, which we didn't expect to have to do. There's a host of good books and literature on just not even board game stuff, just like starting a company and keeping yourself safe. Yeah.
Awesome. So first of all, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing so much of your experience. I think that for people on my end, just the player end, this is always like super fascinating to hear. But before I let you go, why don't you tell us about Last Resort and what's going to be different this time around?
It would be my pleasure. Last Resort is a game that we're all really excited about. It is a tile placement hotel building game about building a hotel in space. You've bought this sort of discount defunct space station, and you are trying to fill it with big neon signs and attractions to get people to who are dabbling in space tourism to come and visit your station. There's a multi-use card element where like everyone is playing one advertisement per round. That dictates like who will come to your station and what tiles you can build, and more importantly, who you can clear off of your station to get them to pay their bill and leave and make space for new people. But it also introduces a malfunctions element of the game, where if you're playing the same adverts as other people, the wires cross and malfunctions start appearing on your station, and you get different pipes leaking and robots malfunctioning and trying to kill off your guests, and things are wrong in your station, which is like really fun to see which ones come out each time. There's loads of different ones in the box, but the real like the bit that makes people switch on when they're playing it and they think, oh, okay, right, this is what's cool about this game, is the drafting. You have these you're drawing out these little meeples each round to see what tourists want to come to your station, and the color of them dictates like what kind of attractions they want to come and see. And the drafting of that, being able to like look at what spaces people have on their station and what ones you're trying to fill in your one, is where there's a lot of like it leans heavily on hate drafting. If that's something people don't like in games, don't come and play Last Resort, because it's the main attraction and it's hilarious. Because if you are drafting someone who wants to come to your station, but you don't have any space that matches their color, you have to eject them off into space, and you lose rankings and things go poorly. But yeah, it's just a really silly, like sci-fi game, a lot of like Douglas Adams references in there, and a lot of like references to sci-fi movies that we love, as a kind of almost a bit of like a thematic antidote to the 3 like Mediterranean Euro games we've just done. We're like, let's do something silly again.
Excellent. If people want to find out more, where can they find you online?
You can go to braincrackgames.com, and we are on Braincrack Games on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Yeah, come and have a look, and come build a space hotel with us.
Fantastic. Lewis, thank you again for coming on. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you, get to know your business. And for those of you who are out there, please do, like, subscribe, comment, ask us any questions that you might have. Yeah. And any last words?
Take care, stay safe, play board games.
All right. Happy gaming, everybody.
Bye-bye.